Aegon III was still a boy, well shy of his 13th birthday, during the horror that was the winter fever. But in the days that followed the death of his Sir Tyland Lannister, the young king displayed a maturity beyond his years, compared to the likes of the old King Jaehaerys, when he too was a boy king. Passing over Sir Marsden Waters, second in command of the Kingsguard, Aegon bestowed white cloaks on Sir Robin Massey and Sir Robert Darkland, and made Massey Lord Commander. With Grand Maester Munkin still down in the city tending to the victims of the winter fever, His Grace turned to his predecessor, instructing the former Grand Maester Orwell to summon Lord Thaddeus Rowan to the city. I would have Lord Rowan as my hand, so Tyland thought well enough of him to offer him my sister's hand in marriage, so I know he can be a person we can trust. This action alone showed the impact the former hand Sir Tyland had on the young king. He also wanted Lady Baela back at court as well. Lord Alan shall be my admiral, as was his grandsire. These were in truth the first key decisions that King Aegon would take in his own right, and for the first time he spoke with a semblance of authority. Orwell, may perhaps hopeful of a royal pardon for his actions during the Hour of the Wolf, hurriedly sent the ravens on their way. King Aegon, although testing his authority as king for the first time, had acted without the consult and consent of his Regency Council. Only 3 of the 7 did remain in King's Landing, however: Lord Peake, Lord Mouton, and Grand Maester Munkin, who came rushing back inside the Red Keep the moment Sir Robert Darkland commanded the gates be opened again. Manfred Mouton was bedridden, still recovering his strength after the battle with the fever. He asked any decision be postponed until Lady Jane Arryn and Lord Royce Carron could be summoned back from the Vale and the Dawlish marches to take part in the deliberations. His colleagues would have none of it, however, Lord Peake insisting that the former regents had given up their place on the council by departing King's Landing. With the Grand Maester's support, Unwin Peake then set aside all of the king's appointments and arrangements on the grounds that no boy of 12 had the judgment to decide such weighty matters himself. Sir Marsden Waters was confirmed as Lord Commander of the Kingsguard, whilst Darkland and Massey were commanded to surrender their white cloaks, so that Sir Marsden might bestow them on knights of his own choosing. Grand Maester Orwell was returned to his cell to await execution. So as not to offend Lord Rowan, the regents offered him a place amongst them, and the office of Justicar and Master of Laws. No similar gesture was made to Alyn Velaryon, but of course there was no question of such a boy of his years and of such uncertain lineage serving as Lord Admiral. The office handed to the king and protector of the realm, previously separate, were now combined and filled by none other than Unwin Peake himself. In the account of the Full Mushroom, he tells us that King Aegon reacted to the decision of his regents with a sullen silence, speaking only once, to protest the dismissal of Massey and Darkland. Kingsguard serve for life, the boys said, to which Lord Peake replied, only when they are properly appointed, your grace. Elsewise, Septon Eustace tells us the king received the decrees courteously. He was reported to have said, I am still a boy, as your lordship knows, and in want of instruction in these matters. If his true feelings were otherwise, Aegon did not choose to voice them, but instead retreated back into silence and passivity after a brief moment of finding his voice as king. For the remainder of his minority, King Aegon III took little part in the rule of his realm, save for fixing his signature and seal upon such papers as Lord Peake presented him. On certain formal occasions, his grace would be brought out to sit on the Iron Throne or welcome an envoy, but elsewise he was little seen inside the Red Keep and never beyond its walls. Unwin Peake would rule the 7 kingdoms in all but name for the best part of 3 years, serving as Lord Regent and Protector of the Realm and Hand of the King. From the outset, it is a marvel how one man managed to secure so much power in such a small amount of time. His house was amongst the oldest in the Reach, its deep roots twisting back to the age of heroes and the first men. Amongst many of his illustrious ancestors, his lordship could count such legends as Sir Orathan, Lord Merrin the Scribe, Lady Yarma of the Golden Bowl, Sir Barquin the Besieger, Lord Edison the Elder, Lord Edison the Younger, and Lord Emric the Avenger. Many Peakes had served as councillors at Highgarden when the Reach was the richest and most powerful kingdom in all of Westeros before the conquest of Aegon. When the pride and power of House Manderley became too great, it was Lomere Peake who humbled them and drove them into exile in the north, for which services King Peregrine III Gardner granted the former Manderley seat at Dunstanbury and its attending lands to House Peake. King Peregrine's son Gawain took Lord Lolmer's daughter as his bride as well, being her the 7th Peake to sit beneath the Green Hand as Queen of all the Reach, though through the centuries other daughters of House Peake married into the Redwynes, Rowans, Costaines, Oakhearts, Florence, and even the High Towers. All this had ending with the coming of Aegon and his dragons. Lord Unwin Peake and his sons had perished on the field of fire beside King Mern. With House Gardener extinct, Aegon the Conqueror had granted Highgarden and the rule of the Reach to House Tyrell, the former royal stewards. The Tyrells had no blood ties to the Peakes, and no reason to favour them, and thus the slow fall of this proud house began. A century later, the Peakes still had 3 castles, and their lands were wide and well populated, if not particularly rich, but they no longer commanded the pride placed amongst the bannermen of Highgarden. Unwin Peake was determined to redress this and restore House Peake to its former greatness. Like his father, who had sided with the majority at the Great Council of 101, he did not believe it was a woman's place to rule over men. During the Dance of the Dragons, Lord Unwin had been amongst the fiercest of the Greens, leading forth 1,000 swords and spears to keep Aegon II on the Iron Throne. When Lord Ormond Hightower fell at Templeton, Lord Unwin believed command of the host should have come to him, but he was denied by scheming rivals. This he never forgave, stabbing the turncloak Owen Borney and plotting the murder of the dragon riders Hugh Hammer and North White. He was foremost of the Caltrops. This was not widely known at the time, and only one of 3 still living. Lord Unwin had proved at Templeton that he was no man to trifle with. He would prove that again in King's Landing. Having elevated Sir Marsden Waters the commander of the King's Guard, Lord Peake now gave white cloaks to 2 of his own kin, his nephew Sir Amory Peake and his bastard brother Sir Mervyn Flowers. The city watch was placed under the command of Sir Lucas Laygood, the son of one of the Caltrops, who died at Templeton. To replace the men who had died during the Winter Fever and the Moon of Madness, he bestowed gold cloaks on 500 of his own loyal men. Lord Peake did not have a trusting nature, and all he had seen and been a part of at Templeton had convinced him that his enemies would bring him down if given half a chance. Ever mindful of his own safety, he surrounded himself with his own personal guard. 10 sellswords loyal only to him, and gold he lavished onto them. In due course they became known as his Fingers. The captain, a Volantine adventurer named Tesario, had a tiger-striped tattoo across his face, the marks of a slave soldier. Men called him Tesario the Tiger to his face, which pleased him. Behind his back they called him Tesario the Thumb, a mocking name the Mushroom had bestowed upon him. Once secure in his own person, the new hand began bringing his own supporters, kin and friends to court, in place of men and women whose loyalties were less assured. His widowed aunt, Clarence Osgrey, was put in charge of Queen Jaehaera's household, supervising her maids and servants. Sir Garth Long, Master-at-Arms at Starpike, was granted the same title at the Red Keep and tasked with the training of King Aegon for knighthood. George Graceford, Lord of Hollyhall, and Sir Victor Rhinsley, Knight of Rhinsley Glade, the sole surviving Caltrop, aside from Lord Peake himself, were appointed Lord Confessor and King's Justice, respectively. The Hand even had the audacity to go as far to dismiss Septon Eustace, bringing in a younger man, Septon Bernard, tend to the spiritual needs of the court and supervise the King's religious and moral instruction. Bernard, too, was of Unwin Peake's blood, being descendant from a younger sister of his great-grandfather. Once relieved of his duties, Septon Eustace would depart King's Landing for Stony Sept, the town of his birth, where he devoted himself to writing of his great, though if somewhat long, work, The Reign of King Viserys, the first of his name, and the Dance of the Dragons that came after.